Right.
Hey guys, we're finally getting back into videoing some stuff. The Lucas Oil short course series, I guess, that we supported took up a lot of our time. So we're getting back to working on this thing. It's got a prototype zoner rotor turbo kit on it that is like a plug and play unit. As you can see, I'm running the Trail 3-inch exhaust that was on the factory turbochargers and the FP greens that we sell. This one also has our 10-inch fan shroud. We designed this in the middle of the short course series because we realized how important the intercooler fan was to the intercooling system. We tested this intercooler shroud and fan versus an factory 18 fan shroud setup, and it helped about 10 degrees. So that was pretty significant, and that was done on the same day in short course racing. So that was a pretty damn good test for that. This thing, you might have seen it before, but we're running an OMC billet intake manifold. We're using a single set of injectors. The second set is blocked off. We were running out of fuel, and there's some other things that are going on, but we're running out of fuel injector with the 1200 cc, so we switched to a 1300 cc injector. And we modified some stuff in the fuel pump to raise fuel pressure a little bit. The big thing is when you start running a lot more boost with the way the fuel pressure system is set up from a Can-Am, the pressure differential across the injector continues to drop, so the injector gets smaller with boost pressure. So there's some things that we can do to fix that. It'd be very easy with a standalone, but the stock ECU is a little bit more difficult because it's expecting to see that system work. So if you try to put like a rising rate fuel pressure regulator, which is really common in turbo cars, your fuel pressure is always varying with vacuum and boost pressure, so it requires quite a bit of work in the tune to get that sorted. So other than that, we switched over to an STM Rage 8 clutch system. It's pretty sweet. This thing has a notched weight, which allows us to have a very high engagement. It's almost like this is not something that you would normally be driving on a trail because of the way it acts. So it essentially the weights are locked into the rollers until there's enough force from the weight to overcome the notch. So this one's currently set up at, it's been moving around as we've been changing the clutch, but it's somewhere in the 4,000 range. So we set the two-step up just underneath the engagement, and then I flip the switch. It allows the engine to free rev, which engages the clutch, which then takes all that power that we've built up on the two-step and then slams it into the belt all at once. So this setup's it's extremely sophisticated, and it takes a lot of time to get it set up and working right. So we're gonna get as close as we can on the dyno, and I know it's gonna change when we get to the street and when we get to dirt and how the car launches and everything else. So we got to get in the ballpark on the dyno though. Other than that, this engine's all stock still. All I've did is put spark plugs in it for the most part. It's still on the same oil that it came from. We might have done an oil change on this one.
I don't know. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know if we did. But she is still pumping. So yeah, I'm gonna get it loaded on the dyno. We made a couple hits already. It made like 317 horsepower, which was pretty solid. And I hope to get the tune dialed in with the 1300s, and you know, the main objective is to get the clutching in the ballpark for the amount of boost we want to run. So that's what we're going to work on today, and we have been getting content this entire time, just really not enough content or enough time to put the content together into a video. So we're kind of debating on how we're going to release all this stuff, but we did some drivability stuff with the RR with our 2020 XRC RR right out of the box. And we built a tune for that car. We have that at different places around the country right now driving. And my main concern with that one honestly was the drivability. I felt like the drivability was pretty crap out of the box. The startup's pretty goofy. There's some other goofy things with it, but that was my main concern, and I really have to have other people driving it to give me some feedback, and they all really love it, like right out of the box. So that's another thing too. I kind of want to like talk about a little bit, like, you know, horsepower is one thing, but drivability and startup and all those other things I feel are pretty important. They're not really talked about ever. As a tuner, I'd say that's probably harder to get right than the power. Like the power is like, you know, this CVT setup adds a little bit because, you know, you're tuning the engine and you kind of have to have the clutching in the ballpark so that you can properly tune the engine at various RPMs. But getting the startup and the drivability on big injectors and different fuels and everything else, that's like, I feel like that's the hardest and most important part of it. And, you know, having extremely reliable tunes, we have not had a single issue yet with any of our tunes. I mean, we take you know, I personally have put a lot of weight on myself by reviewing data logs from all of our bigger injector kits. And that's another part of the reason why we're potentially switching over to injector dynamics. So, you know, our current injectors are extremely consistent injector to injector in a set, but from injector set to injector set, they could have a variance to them. So it does, you know, to get the perfect startup and the perfect drivability and the right AFR for maximum power, there are little tweaks that are made, and it for some people it's probably not that important, but it helps me sleep better at night knowing that each customer is making the maximum power for the setup. It's safe, their car runs well, starts well, everything like that. So this car right now is on a Motec with a 4-bar for testing. I'm gonna put the stock ECU back in it after I get this all dialed in. And this is another thing too, is like the ECU that's in the car won't necessarily give you the ability to make more horsepower. Like it, you know, like as long as if you can run the same boost pressure, you know, the stock ECU is just as capable for delivering the correct amount of ignition timing and the correct amount of fuel so that this engine makes horsepower. So the fact that I have a pretty expensive Motec in the car doesn't mean anything other than I have the ability to live tune the car, live data log the car. I have the pretty badass crazy 2-step on it, and I have the ability to data log other sensors that the factory ECU can't necessarily take in very easily. So like my wideband is streaming factory CAN bus into the ECU for full-time closed loop, which the stock ECU doesn't do. So that the ECU is always compensating to achieve my target AFR all the time, where the stock ECU will transition into an open loop where the tune is the only thing that's telling it how much fuel to deliver, where the Motec can make live changes all the time. But with all that being said, I'll drop a little hint that we got some pretty badass stock ECU stuff in the works for the month of October.
Well, then you're gonna break the ice on it.
I'm just gonna say that. That's enough. But it's pretty much infinite what we can do. So we're gonna get to working on this. I just did a clutch change, pretty drastic clutch change to get it back in the ballpark where we need to be. Might grab a little bit of lunch, then we'll do some pulls on the dyno. So stay tuned.